Okay, thank you. What we're going to talk about today is budgeting, and we'll start off and talk in general about the process, and then we'll get into some more detail that you guys will want to hear on some of the changes that are new to this year. And then we'll talk specifically about the reports that I've created that surround the changes, and then we'll talk about a tool that I've created that hopefully explains how we want to account for some things throughout the year. So let's start with an overview of the process. Again, here's the topics that we just talked about. What is the budget and why do we develop one? Budget versus actual. Those are two different things, and we'll explain kind of what each one means. Then we'll talk in general about the budget process, and there's three steps to that process that continue throughout the year. We'll talk about everybody's role in the budget, the 2009 changes, some definitions that you need to know or understand when we're discussing budget, and then the final thing is the budget manual, which is the tool that I had created. So as we talk about a budget, what is a budget? It's a financial plan for spending in the upcoming year. So is it going to be totally accurate? No, it's just our best estimate of how we want to spend our money before we get into the current year. It guides our spending of the functional and operational managers, so everyone should have a piece in this. There's 13 different people that own a portion of this for ALD. They have created it, presented it to the directors have accepted it, made changes, we've communicated it back to them, so now we're moving forward with it. We are also required by state statute to create and submit a budget to the state, so we've done that. And the final thing that a budget does is it communicates and sets a level of accountability. Budget versus financial statements. Like we just said, budget is an estimate or plan. The budget is the financial document that communicates what we're going to spend money on, how we're going to spend it. It also can be detailed enough as to what time of year we're going to spend that money. Accounting of financial statements is the actual results. That's after the fact. So the budget is the plan. After the fact is accounting or financial records. Here's a little bit about the process. It's 3 steps. The first step is creation. And for us, that starts in June. We go through that, and that's when you guys will begin to be heavily involved in creating the budget for the next year. We look at several tools when we want to create that plan, and we'll go into that in just a minute. The next thing is after the budget is created, it's submitted, and finance puts it in a format that's familiar with everyone. And from that format, we take that and use it to submit to the state, also submit to the public. The final thing is, once you get it back, you begin to monitor your budget, and that's where we're at right now in the process. So let's talk a little bit more about creation. Like I said, that does start in June. There's some key things that we want to take into consideration when we're creating our budget. First thing is the strategic plan. The strategic plan outlines things that are important to the district, so we want to make sure that those important tactics have ample funding so we can make sure that they take place. The second thing that we're going to take into consideration is some long-term financial projections. We'll look at how we've spent money in the past and determine if that's a good indicator on how we should spend money in the current year. For instance, salaries. We kind of know what salaries have been over the history of the district, and that helps us project what salaries will be next year. We'll take into consideration if we need to add staffing, reduce staffing, but the historical presentation is a good indicator for us to get started with salaries. The next thing that we'll look at is asset replacement schedules. What we've done is created a schedule where we have assets listed and we know approximately how long they're going to last. If we take that into the budget process, then we know if you've had a computer that's 5 years old, it's on the verge of falling apart, or the technology is not as good as it needs to be, so that's something that needs to be replaced. And that's something that comes out of our asset replacement schedule. The final thing that we need to do is look at your department or library goals and make sure that we have funding for those. They should be in line with the discussions the directors are having and our strategic plan. But again, that's something that you need to plan ahead and know what you want to accomplish in the next year and make sure your budget reflects that. So as we develop it internally, that's all going to start with you and your locations or departments. You will come up with that document internally and submit it to finance. Finance is going to take that and put it in a format that makes sense to them and the directors. So there's been a format that's been used for a history of time here that's, once we start talking about budget documents, everyone is looking for information in a certain format. And that's what finance helps facilitate, getting it into that format. We will also look at the information that's submitted and make sure that it makes sense from a financial standpoint, so we can help facilitate the discussions that the directors are having on making the budget work. They'll take into consideration everybody's requests that are submitted, and they will make decisions on what needs to be in the budget and what has to be left out of the budget based on our financial needs for the future period. The next part is acceptance. How that works is there's several statutory requirements that the district goes through. By October 15th, we have to present a draft budget to the board of directors. In November, the public can come and ask questions about that document. It's a public hearing in November. So that meeting, it's available to ask questions. They can come and get the budget from the finance office anytime after it's been released to the board until the time it's been accepted. And you'll see in December is when it's finally accepted. We have to do that by December 15th because we have to submit revenue numbers to the county to make sure that we get proper property taxes for the year. So after we go through that process and understand what our budget is, finance is in a position that we can get back to each of your departments and tell you exactly what your budget is. We can talk in detail as to this is what you requested, these are the things that didn't make it through the budget process, this is actually the money that you have to spend. So that wraps up the acceptance process.